Hi there, I'm Dr. Rossler. I'm one of the biology faculty at Johnson & Wales University and also the pre-health advisor. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about some of the nitty-gritty about the application process for both PT and OT programs, as they're fairly similar to each other, and we can get through them kind of at the same time. So if you haven't by now watched the overview video in which I talk about some of the commonalities of all the programs in terms of application processes, I will encourage you to do so. All right, there's a video that's kind of an overview, and it talks a bit about GREs and recommendations, etc. So take a second, you just pause it here and just watch that video. And then if you feel like you're ready to go ahead and embark upon more of the nitty gritty, here we go. So hopefully you have access to these sheets that I've prepared. They kind of go through in a lot of detail all the nitty gritty. And if you don't have access to them, please reach out to me. Again, my name is just Kristen Rossler, Rosler at Johnson & Wales. And I can usually get those to you. Again, it's Krosler at JWU.edu. Okay, so let's look at the coursework, because that's a big thing that you need to be aware of kind of going into all of this. So there's a link right there in that sheet that I gave you that shows the courseworks that are required for a lot of the major pathways that many of you are going into. So let's look at OT and PT to start off with. We're going to see that there's actually a fair amount of variation between schools, but I've tried to kind of look at all the commonalities. Now, PT, in terms of science coursework that's required, is that they're going to require you to take a full 2 terms of biology plus labs, a full 2 terms of general chemistry plus labs. Now, note that's general chemistry and not foundations in chemistry. Some majors will have foundations, and just know that if your major is asking you to take foundations in chemistry and you want to go the PT route especially, make sure that you ask for an override, all right, from your advisor. They'll always give that to you. Okay, because a little bit, we're going to see that general chemistry is actually a little bit more mathematical and a little bit more rigorous. And that's what you're going to need to take in order to get successful entry into PT. Also, we're going to require, if you're PT, I'll encourage you to take physics, 2 terms plus labs. Obviously, there's a lot of biomechanics that's involved in physical therapy, so that's a requirement. Now, OT, it's suggested that you take that. It's not necessarily required. And it's also a good idea to be taking, again, some of these other courses for occupational therapy, but again, it's not often required. Yeah, so that's a kind of an interesting thing. Again, look at the programs that you plan to apply to just to make sure, but that's kind of the general rule of thumb that I've seen. Also, make sure for both PT and OT that you're taking both 2 terms fully of anatomy and physiology, all right, plus labs. Right, so at Johnson & Wales currently we have anatomy in 1 term and then physiology and lab, both of those with labs in another term. You can take them out of sequence. It doesn't really quite matter. I think they generally prefer you to take one versus the other. But long story short, you need to take both of those in any relationship plus labs that you can. Now there's talk of a new course or changes into the coursework of where we combine A and P1. So anatomy and physiology would be merged into 2 terms for a full year. So there'd be an A and P1 and an A and P2 plus labs. And so if that is an option, again, that might be another way to go. But either way, you need to have that material in. And so in terms of the science coursework, that is all that's quote unquote required. Please know that especially for PT and for OT, they're going to be looking at those science grades, pretty with a fine-tooth comb. And so it's important to do extra well in those BCP classes, the biologies, the chemistries, and the physics. All right, because those grades kind of matter actually in a special way. Now, if we look at this list and we look at the non-sciencey courses that are required or not required, we're going to see that both of those programs are going to require you to take a statistics course. So biostats or regular statistics will suffice. And they're both going to require you to take an introductory psychology course. Okay, so Psych 1001 fits the bill. Now, many of you who are going the OT path, I will encourage you to take developmental psychology, which is, I think, 2002. Oh, sorry, abnormal psychology. Sorry, abnormal psychology is 2002 from what I remember. And they often will encourage you to take developmental psychology. So a fair number of psychology courses will help you. They're not always required for every OT program. So again, look ahead. And again, if you are going the PT route, sometimes that abnormal psychology is also a boon. All right, so those are courseworks that are required. If you're thinking about OT, just remember that we have an OT program, as I mentioned before, doctorate program that's fantastic, and you may want to look into that. And a good thing is that you have a little bit of a leg up if you're a JWU student who's in the biology or health science majors. If you successfully complete those majors, we have an articulation agreement with those programs, and you should look into that. All right, let me just show you where that is. All right, so if we go back to that pre-health, just scroll real quickly down to the OT, since we're talking about the articulation agreement. And what you're going to see here is down here in this list, there is actually the link for the bio health science OTD agreement. And so what it tells you is that they're going to actually waive some requirements, the GRE requirement, and you actually are going to be specifically set up for some typically. So fingers crossed. It doesn't guarantee the scholarship. It just means that they're available potentially. So yeah, look into that, and also look into the JWU OTD program. They seem to be lovely and doing a great job. All right, going back to where we were, let's see, I think, so let's kind of let's go back since we're on the OT page. Let's just look a little bit more there. Both of the programs are going to require you to observe either an OT or a PT. All right, we're going to see that both of those programs, they have some requirements. I will encourage you to get more. More hours is always better than less hours. All right, so some sort of OT observation. So start early reaching out to OTs. If you're at Johnson & Wales, I will encourage you to actually reach out to some of those OT professors in the OTD program, as they are very keen to often help you. If you are looking at PT, I will encourage you again to reach out to family, friends, et cetera, people that you know who might be in the PT world, and any connections that you might have that are physical therapists, so that you can actually observe them. Some students have great luck in specific, in particular with PT, becoming PT aides. So you can also look for those jobs. Oftentimes, if you start talking to PTs, they know of those positions, and they might be able to make a position for you. So that's great. So again, shooting for more is always better. I will encourage you for minimum of 20 hours, but many schools for PT in particular are going to require 100 hours at least. So yeah, so get busy and start documenting on a log the number of hours that you observe or shadow, et cetera, with these various different professionals. All right. You may be able to use both PT and OT observation or aid work as an internship, depending on your major. Typically, I know with the biology and I think health science is that we reserve that for like when you're a junior, but talk to your advisor in your major ahead of time. Excuse me, as well as experiential learning. They're amazing at helping you to make this stuff count for grade work. All right, so hopefully that's making sense. So bouncing back and forth is not too problematic for you all. As I mentioned in the video, volunteering is important for all of these professional programs. So if you haven't done any of that, maybe get busy on that. Your religious groups, tutoring, counseling, etc. There's lots of different things out there. It just shows that you're engaged in your community and you have a little bit more rapport with people. All right, so that's going to be good. Those are good, just life skills to have. So that's why they encourage it. GRE testing is required for many of these programs. I think all PT schools, to my knowledge, require it. And most OT programs, or many OT programs, are going to require it. So don't be fearful of it. It's not too bad. You don't have to crush it. You don't necessarily have to have the highest GRE percentile ever, but they want to be able to see that you can handle, the rigors of a graduate education. If you're thinking about taking it, there's a link here to getting started actually with the GRE. I think that's actually down below, as well as this is actually a directory of all the PT programs in the United States and whether or not they require the GRE. Similarly, I think I have another one down here for OT. Let me look at that. Yes, and here's my OT GRE requirements link. So again, look into the schools that you're thinking about applying to and start early. I will encourage you to start thinking about the GRE, about 3 to 6 months in advance, and so that you can study. Right? It actually helps quite a bit. Obviously, there's some apps online that you can get access to or pay for. One of the really good ones that's online that I highly recommend to students thinking about taking the GRE, that our students have had great success with, and it's quite affordable, is this Magoosh. All right, so if you go to Magoosh GRE, you'll find a pretty good affordable program. Again, many of our PA students have taken it and really catapulted their GRE percentiles up. So again, especially if your grades are sort of in that good region, but not maybe amazing region, a good GRE score can really help you. All right. By that same logic, if you've been a really good student and your GRE is not so great, it's not the end of the world. It potentially could still work out, but again, higher percentile is always a good thing. Each time you take the GRE, it's about $200 at least. So you don't want to be taking this thing repetitively. So anyway, think about that. Also, I talked in the video about scientific research. If that's something that is available to you, I think it's a good opportunity to always take as you're learning more about the scientific method. Many of the PT and OT programs that you're going to be applying to are doctorate programs, and even for master's programs, you're going to be doing a research component. So it's really good to understand the scientific method, in its totality. So having a little bit more experience with that in the undergrad is just always a boon. And also it can lead to publications that'll help you to become a better applicant. All right. What else? All right. So we've talked about, again, observation, again, important for both fields, volunteering, GREs, research. Something that you may also want to continue is medical outreach. There's ones available for PT and OT. And here are some links for that. It's not required, but it's something that might just be of interest to you. Now, for both of these programs, what we're going to see is, like I said, a year before you actually apply, or a year before you would actually matriculate into one of these programs, that's kind of when you want to start the whole process in an ideal world. All right, so if you are hoping to start a PT or OT school in like the summer to fall of 2025, that means the summer to fall of 2024, you should start really thinking about that GRE, right? So get that GRE going, and hopefully start thinking about when you're going to take that test and give yourself time to potentially retake it if necessary. All right, so so just a little bit in advance of that year mark, it's good to take that GRE. Also, about a year in advance, I would encourage you to start writing that personal statement. All right. So in the spring, maybe before, while you're, it's a little bit of a therapy session sometimes, right? Thinking about why you want to be a PT, why you want to be an OT, and giving those personal experiences of things that you've observed of how it's transformative to be a PT or an OT, right? To really have that relationship in your patients' lives, how meaningful that has been, either observing it or in your real life. That's something, you want to write about. I will encourage you to reach out to faculty and even myself if you have questions about how to set those up, because they can be intimidating. I'll also encourage you to look at examples that are online for both the PT personal statements and OT personal statements. All right, so starting in advance is always a good idea. The application portals usually start open in the summer. And so a year in advance that summer, right, that's when you really want to get those applications in as early as possible. Here we can see that the OT portal always seems to open July 22nd. And when we look at the PT portal opens, the PT portal app opens in July 5th every year. And it's kind of fun. So as soon after those portals open, I will encourage you to get your applications in. It's always the early bird gets the worm. And graduate programs have a tendency to start working through their applications from the top down, right? Or from whoever got theirs in first. So do that. Obviously, be checking with your recommenders in advance. So what's going to happen is that you're going to put your application in through these portals. You're going to be putting all your grades at every university you've ever attended. It's going to be converted to a standardized kind of system. You'll be putting your personal statements in, et cetera, and your observation or clinical time. And then you're going to put the names of the persons that you want to recommend you. All right. And it's usually about 3 to 4 for both of these. And one of the things that I will encourage you to do is to reach out to your recommenders in advance, making sure that they're actually around in the summer. or right after the time that you've actually put in your application. If you have a recommender who's out of the country or not checking their email, right, they're not going to get it done potentially. And so you want to make sure that they get theirs done in a timely manner so that you are, again, top on that list. All right, so hopefully that's making sense. Yeah, they're very similar between the two programs. So again, there's a little less pressure to get yours in immediately. With OT, you can wait a little bit more towards the fall side, just because there are more programs. That's the only reason for that. And yeah, it just depends on, hopefully you and your life and what how things are working out for you. Interviews are typically in the months after the applications are all due. And I will encourage you to get help from your faculty to practice, do some mock interviews, and also reach out to experiential learning or myself, because sometimes we can actually squeeze those in as well. And we kind of know oftentimes the question they're typically asked. Now, for all of these programs, what we're going to see, as I've mentioned before, here, I'll encourage you to read through these FAQs. Because many of your questions may be addressed this way in terms of what GREs to shoot for, what BCP means, right? BCP is specifically those biology, chemistry, and physics grades, and what to do if your grades are not strong enough, right? So, there's a lot of variation in acceptance rates at different schools, but what we see by and large is that if students don't have perfect grades coming out of undergrad, I will encourage you to wait, right? I will encourage you to wait a little bit of extra time, maybe take some courses over again, or take new classes, specifically in the BCPs, that'll improve your chance of admissions, right? And because we see that both programs have an average age of acceptance of around 24 years old. So a lot of people take several gap years. There's going to be a lot of people who are even older than 24, if you can imagine. So yeah, take your time. And again, just be paying attention that there's a lot of applicants for these prestigious programs. And you want to apply once because it's kind of expensive. What else? If you need to retake some classes, you want to look for accredited programs. There's also often a lot of online and in-person ones that are good for both PT and OT. One that I've had really good success with, and our PA students have been using, pre-PA students, is Portage. They're great. It's affordable. And there's also UC Berkeley Extension Services. They have a lot of health-related courses that are offered online. They're all accredited. And there's a ton of others out there. So don't restrict yourself just to these. I just have personal experience with one of those. So look through these. There's a lot of information in terms of what kind of programs to be looking for, in-state, out-of-state, private, and public, and how to establish residency. That's actually more of a thing, and less of a thing for OT, because there aren't as many OT state OT schools, to my knowledge. Maybe there are, but just to my knowledge, there aren't. But in terms of PT schools, there are actually a lot more state ones. In particular, Rhode Island, actually at URI, does have a state PT school that's very well reviewed, has fairly is prestigious, etc. And I'll encourage you to look at that if you are a Rhode Island resident, because it's a little bit more affordable as well. Anyway, hopefully that helps you in terms of planning out your PT and OT specifics and the timeline that you want to think about for those. Again, look at the side, and that's a good ballpark to be shooting for. Again, all the best to you and good luck.